And I have 4 different flutes that cover those ranges.
Would you like the 4th?
All right. So, if we looked at these instruments and thought of them as a chorus, your chorus has the soprano, the alto, the tenor, and the bass. So this is sort of like having your own chorus, but in flutes. Now the highest one is the piccolo. Now, when they first started making these, they made them out of either bone or wood. So that's what they had around. Some piccolos, like this one, is still made out of wood, and it just has the metal keys. Right? So you can hear it's really high pitched. It's not the one I usually play. The one that you would see most, and the one that if you started to play flute, you would start on, is the C flute. This is the most common flute that you'll have in your bands, and it sounds like this. Now the one that I have is known as a French style flute, and if you look you can see that some of the keys have open holes on them versus the closed ones, and what these do is they help with the sound. Now there was a man with the last name was Boehm, and he was the one who originally came up with these because he was listening to a performance and it inspired him, and he looked at the older flutes that had been made, which all they were in the beginning was a flute with a hole to blow over and 6 different little holes that you cover with your fingers. So he took that and he made this type of flute. And then the next flute that you would see is an alto flute. And this one gets a little bit lower. As they get bigger, they get lower because how instruments work is through vibrations of sounds. And when you blow over this, it causes vibrations through the flute. And the bigger the one you have, the more space that they have to go and the waves get bigger. With the smaller ones, since they're so small, there's a short little space, so they go really, really fast. So if somebody gets excited, they might talk in a higher register, but normally they'll talk in a lower register. So here is the alto flute.
Special delivery.
All right. Now, my favorite flute is the lowest of the flutes. And I heard you guys talking about the saxophones earlier. The big, big saxophone that wraps around at the top, that's the one that I play all the time in my jazz band and my concert band. So I like the lower notes. This is the bass flute, and believe it or not, this is not the biggest flute that I have ever seen. There's one bigger, and it's called the contrabass. Have any of you ever heard a string bass play? Those big, big string basses? Well, the contrabass flute is so low that it kind of sounds in that range. Now the contrabass flute comes up from the floor, comes up to about right here, comes down in a 4 and over so you can play it. But this is the bass flute. It's the lowest one that we have at Keene State, and this is how it sounds. All right. Does anybody have any questions about any of these flutes? Yes.
In The Wizard of Oz, I think I just figured out the instrumental sound that I have never known what it was before. I think that's what it was.
The bass.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Why is it curved like that?
This is curved like this, and this one is too, because if you straighten these out and I were to try and play it,
It'd be pretty hard.
I'd have to play it out here. And it'd be really, really hard to stretch out and grab those. This alto flute that I have in the case, it actually has a straight head joint. So if somebody wanted to, they could play it. It would just be out here. So by curving it, it just makes it easier for the player to reach the notes. Yep.
The contrabass flute.
Yes.
I've seen a picture. Can you tell them how wide that tube is?
So the tube on that is probably, let's say about this wide around.
Wow.
And in order to carry it around with them, the one that I've seen, it looks like a suitcase, like a circle suitcase like this. And she actually has to pull it behind her to carry it around. And you have to basically hold it on its side to put it together. You wouldn't be tall enough to reach it. Yep.
What's the lowest note you can play
The
on?
lowest note that I can play on this is a low C. Doesn't want to speak. Yep.
What's the highest note you can play on that?
Highest on this one. I've never tried, so let's see. That's probably as high as this one's gonna go. Trying to think of the fingerings for that high. Yeah, it's probably about the range of it, but usually it never gets that high. This is used a lot of times in the flute choirs as the bass instrument. So, like in a band, you would hear the bass guitar and such. Yep. You have a question? No? Anybody else?
I just am wondering, when you're blowing into then one of those very large flutes, does that take a lot more exertion on your part? Is that harder to do because of the space?
On the different flutes, the holes, it's only a little bit bigger. So the difference is you're going to have to use a lot more air to get the same sound out. But other than that, it's pretty easy switch. The hardest one to switch to, for me at least, is the piccolo, because it is smaller and it does require quite a bit of air as well. Half of the air that you're going to use to play is going to be going over the top. So when you play, half it goes up and then half it'll go in, and then that creates the vibrations within the instrument. Yeah?
Do they ever use piccolos in a group? Or
Yep.
do they usually just
They use piccolos in all types of ensembles. We've used them in flute choir. We use them in concert band. There are a few pieces that we're doing right now that do have the piccolo in it. And because of its very high sound, it usually has a melody line. Everybody can hear it. It doesn't matter how many people are in the band. When somebody plays that piccolo, you're going to be able to hear it. Yep.
What's the lowest note you can play on the piccolo?
On the piccolo.
That was my question.
The lowest note that you can play on the piccolo is a low D, because it doesn't have any of the extra side keys that the other flutes would have. On my flute, I have keys down here so I can play a low C sharp, a low C, and then some flutes have this low B key. Adds an extra one so I can go down an extra note. But because of the size of the piccolo, it doesn't have those down there, so the lowest note is a D.
When you get to the extreme ranges of an instrument, it becomes very difficult to make those notes speak.
Yeah.
And she's trying to play the very lowest note that you can on that. That's hard.
That reminds me of last year when we played recorder, we didn't start with a note where you cover all the holes, because you really have to be able to control the air and cover all the holes. So we start with the higher notes, the same thing there.
Yep. Anybody else? Yes.
What's the highest note on the
The
piccolo?
highest note on the piccolo. I don't know if you want to hear it.
I want to.
Let's see.
You ready?
I actually like it. That's nothing compared to the fire alarm. That could be our fire alarm.
Well, thank you very much. This was really a treat to see this. We don't often see all the different size flutes. So now we see a whole family, and that's very, very important to us in this grade. Thank you.
Where's the case?
The case of the piccolo I have over there.
Can you show us?
Yes.
I want to smell it. My Esperanto.